Hello, class. Today's story that we're going to be reading is another version of the fairy tale Tom Thumb. This story is called Thumbelina, and it is set in Denmark. Now, Denmark is a country in Europe, and it is surrounded by lots and lots of water called canals. In Denmark, you might see a lot of gardens in that country. Denmark is known for many gardens full of beautiful flowers, and it also is very unique because it is surrounded by water on three sides. That makes it a peninsula, which means that it was really easy for people to travel from Denmark to other countries like Norway or the United Kingdom. Today's story, Thumbelina, is about a tiny little girl. Tom Thumb was all about a tiny little boy. We even see the word thumb in Thumbelina, so I'm guessing that this girl isn't very big. Let's read to find out all about Thumbelina. Okay, as I'm reading, try to keep your mental movie sketches so that you can keep track of all the important details. Thumbelina. Once there was a woman who wanted a child more than anything in the world. At last, in loneliness and in sorrow and deep sadness, she went to an old wise woman and spoke of her desire. That is as easy as winking, said the old wise woman. Take this seed and plant it in a flower pot filled with good, rich earth. Water it carefully and guard it very well. The woman did as the wise old woman had said. The first time she watered the seed, a large and brilliant flower sprang up. It was still a bud, its petals tightly closed. The woman bent to kiss the flower, but the moment her lips touched the silky petals, they began to open. Continue. Think, why did the woman go to see this other old wise woman? What did she want? Child. The woman could not believe her eyes. There inside sat a tiny little girl. She was perfectly formed, as graceful as the flower from which she'd come. When the woman held her, she discovered that the tiny girl was scarcely the size of her thumb. Now, scarcely, that means barely or hardly, so that means it's even smaller than a thumb. That is a very small person. Though she was a wonderful child in every way, she never grew at all. She was called Thumbelina and was treated with great extravagance and care. Extravagance is something like we saw in Cinderella where it's fancy and she's given all the things that she needs. She lives a life of luxury and she gets all the stuff she wants. What a life. Her cradle was a polished walnut shell. Each night she kept between fresh flower petals. In the daytime, she liked to sit on a table and sing in the sunlight. Her voice was beautiful, high and haunting and silvery. One night, as she lay sleeping, a toad hopped in the window. What a lovely wife for my son, she said. Without even looking at her, she took up the walnut shell and hopped off with it to the garden. Would you like to have a toad, like a big frog, for a husband or a wife? I don't know. Here, look what I brought you, the toad proudly showed to her son. But the only sound he could utter was croak, croak, croak. Don't talk so loud, or you'll wake her, complained the mother toad. She might still run away from us. So the mother toad and her son went back to their home near the stream's edge. They placed Thumbelina on a lily pad in the middle of the water so that she could not escape. This is not very fair. Poor Thumbelina doesn't even know what's going on. And she's being sent into a place that she can't get rid of. She can't escape. In the morning, Thumbelina woke up and looked all around her at the great arching sky. She felt her lily pad rock in the motion of the stream and cried out in terror. Why do you think Thumbelina is frightened? Think about that one. The mother toad and her son heard Thumbelina crying and went to see what was the matter. Thinking that Thumbelina was just crying out of loneliness, they ignored her and returned to making her wedding dress. Think to yourself, is that very fair for the mother toad and the son toad to just ignore Thumbelina's cries? What do you think she's really crying about? Upon hearing her sobs, a fish swimming in the water below came to the surface and looked curiously at Thumbelina. A butterfly also heard her cries and flew over to see what was wrong. "Oh, please help me," she said. "I must get away from here." And so the fish began to gnaw the lily stalk with his sharp little teeth. So these little lily pads here, they're suspended in the ground. There's almost like a cord on the bottom, and that stem, it gets stuck in the mud. So the fish is chomping away at that. Think, why is he doing that? At last, the leaf broke free and floated down the stream. Away went Thumbelina, gently spinning with the current. Gradually, the fear left her, and she began to enjoy the journey. Never before had she been outside. Why hasn't Thumbelina been outside? I think it has something to do with her size or her extravagant lifestyle. Well, Thumbelina floated down the river, far, far away from the mother toad and her son. It was summertime, and she spent the next several months drifting peacefully from place to place along the shore. When it rained, she slept under a large, spreading leaf to shelter her from the rain. For food, she sipped nectar from the flowers, ate wild berries, and drank the dew that lay on the leaves at dawn. She listened to the birds chirping in the trees above her and made friends with butterflies that floated on the breeze nearby. Before long, though, summer came to an end and autumn quickly passed. The cold chill of winter soon filled the air. There were no more berries or food. All the birds and butterflies had disappeared. Thumbelina was cold and hungry. Now she was truly alone, and the place was a foreign land to her. It means it's unfamiliar. She doesn't recognize anything. Why would it be so hard to recognize? Then it started to snow. The snow came at her in white, swirling clouds, and she quickly wrapped herself up with a leaf, curled up under a mushroom, and tried to keep herself dry. Still, she shivered with cold. Do you think Thumbelina was as happy in winter as she was in summer? What's some proof that she might be feeling the way that she feels right now? What do you notice on her face? Well, not far away, a field mouse was gathering some last bits of kindling, that's wood, to burn in her fireplace during the winter. When she saw Thumbelina, she said, "My poor dear, you are nearly frozen with cold. You must come and spend the winter with me. I have plenty to eat, and my home is warm and dry." Thumbelina gratefully accepted the invitation and followed the field mouse to a small hole in the ground. As they descended into the tunnel, Thumbelina realized that she was in the snug, small dwelling of a field mouse. So a dwelling is like a tiny little home. Corn was piled up all around her, and its smell was in the air. Seems like things are getting better for Thumbelina. "Please," said Thumbelina, "could I have a bit of corn to eat?" "You poor dear thing," said the field mouse answered kindly. "You had better come into my room and have dinner with me." The two got on well together, and after some days the field mouse invited Thumbelina to work for her and stay in the winter. Every day Thumbelina helped the field mouse with her housework, and they would spend the rest of their day enjoying a cup of tea and chatting before the fire. Thumbelina soon grew very fond of the field mouse. She was happy to have such a good and kind friend. How does the field mouse compare to the toad? Who treats Thumbelina better and why? Late one evening, the field mouse said to dust the floor and polish everything in the room until it shone. An important visitor was coming to call. This was a mole who was very rich and wore sleek velvet coats. But he had very poor eyesight, even with his glasses, so he could barely see. He hated the sun and mocked all the creatures that lived outdoors. The field mouse, however, was impressed by the mole's riches. She told Thumbelina to sing for him and tell stories of her travels. As he listened to Thumbelina's beautiful voice, the mole fell in love with her. By the next time that he came to visit, he said he would show them his rooms underground. By the pale light of a piece of torchwood, he led them through a long, twisting passage. I'm not getting a good feeling about this. Suddenly, they came upon a swallow lying sprawled in the passageway. That's this bird here. Thumbelina felt very badly for the swallow, but the mole kicked at him with his stumpy legs. What a pitiful life to be a bird, he said. A creature who does nothing all day but fly from branch to branch is not prepared for winter. Thumbelina said nothing, and the mole and the field mouse went on to walk ahead. Goodbye, swallow, she said. It might have been you who sang to me this summer when all the trees were green. She laid her head on his soft feathers for a moment, then darted back in fright. Something moved inside him with the slow, steady rhythm of a heartbeat. The bird was not dead, he was merely numbed with cold. The warmth of Thumbelina's body had stirred him back to life. Each night after that, she crept out of bed to tend to the swallow. She was caring for him. As he grew much stronger, he told her how he had torn his wing on a thorn bush. The other swallows had flown away to the warm countries, but he had not been able to keep up with them. At last, he could go no further and had plummeted to the ground. Thumbelina kept the swallow a secret from the field mouse and the mole. Why do you think that she's keeping this bird a secret? I'm thinking it has something to do with that nasty mole. When spring warmed the earth once more, Thumbelina knew it was time for the swallow to go. His wing healed now. Each night he fluttered over and over again, strengthening it for flying. Won't you come back with me? He asked her. You can easily sit upon my back, and I will carry you away to the leafy woods. But Thumbelina could not bring herself to abandon the field mouse who had kept her from starving. Abandon means that you're going to leave them behind. So she made a hole in the roof of a passageway and watched longingly as the swallow flew out into the sunshine. She felt all the pleasure in her life was going with him. That means that she's really sad and really upset. Why is she so sad? Every evening now the mole came to Thumbelina. He made her sing until her voice grew hoarse. That means that she's singing so much she can't talk. Whenever she stopped, he prodded her to continue. This was the way that he loved her. Without ever once asking Thumbelina, the mole and the field mouse agreed that she would marry him in autumn. But Thumbelina did not want to marry the mole. She wept bitterly whenever she thought of her wedding day. Every morning when the sun rose and early evening when it set, she was allowed to go to the doorsill and stand outside. In the heat of August, the corn had grown as high as a forest. When the wind blew the stalks apart, she could see bright pieces of sky. How beautiful it was. She did not know how she could live deep inside the earth with a mole, whom she now despised more than ever. Despised means that you disliked them a lot. As the time came for her wedding to draw closer, she sobbed out her fears to the field mouse. Nonsense, said the field mouse. Don't be stubborn. His velvet coat is handsome, and the food in his pantry is fit for a queen. Thumbelina understood then that she was trapped as surely as if she were in a cage. Summer was ending, and she knew she would never be able to survive outside through the harsh, cold months of winter. By now, the wedding day had come. For the last time, she crept to the door still to stand in the sunshine. She knew the mole would never permit her to leave his side. She wept as she felt the earth warmth upon her face and made ready to go back into the earth. Then suddenly above her, she heard a shower of notes, a glorious morning song. Where do you think that music is coming from? It's from the bird. She looked up, and there was the swallow. The cold winter is coming again, he said, flying down to her. I've looked for you many times, and now I must fly away to the warm countries. Won't you come with me? I'll take you to where it is always summer. This time Thumbelina did not hesitate. She climbed onto the swallow's back. Then he rose back up into the sky. They flew over forests and fields, high above mountains with snow-capped peaks. When Thumbelina felt the cold, bleak air, she crept in under the swallow's feathers. It was so safe and close, a blanket of the softest down. At last they arrived in the warm countries. The sun beat down upon the earth, and the light was clear as crystal. Lemons and oranges hung on the tree, and the air was fragrant with the smell of spices. That means the air had a nice smell. The swallow flew on until they came to a dazzling white palace. In the pillars were many nests, and on one of these was the swallow's home. I dearly love you, and I yearn to keep you with me, said the swallow sadly. But I do not think you could live as high up as I do, for when the wind comes, you might fall. Why don't you take one of the flowers that grow below you for your home? At least we shall be neighbors. Thumbelina did not remember that she had lived before in a flower, but the idea seemed to her to be a good one. The swallow set her down gently on the petals of brilliantly colored flower. Then she slid inside. But this could not be, she thought. The home was already taken. A young man was standing there, shining as if he had been made of glass. A silver crown was on his head, and gauzy wings grew from his back. Isn't he wonderful? Thought Thumbelina. Never before had she seen a person just her size. The young man explained to Thumbelina that a small person lived in each of these flowers. He was their king. Then he took off his crown and placed it upon Thumbelina's head. You are so lovely, he said. Won't you be my queen? Thumbelina never thought to refuse. She could tell he was kind by the sound of his voice and the curve of his mouth. She felt that at last she had come home. The king declared that there was going to be a welcoming party more joyful than any ever seen in the land. From all the flowers, men and women came bringing gifts for Thumbelina, but the most wonderful was a pair of tiny wings that could be fastened to her back so she too could dart among the flowers. Everyone danced all night, and above them in his nest was the swallow, singing for them his most heartwarming tune. The end. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that story. Get to writing about your favorite part.